Welcome to episode 9 of Agency Intensive. I'm Richard Hill, your host. In this episode, I speak with Adam Pearce, CEO at Blend Commerce and co-founder at the eCom Collab Club. Adam owns and operates a pure Shopify CRO agency and runs the ever-growing e-commerce events company with global ambition. We chat deep service focus and working with specific partners, navigating the competitive UK market and overcoming challenges of scaling his agency, navigating capacity planning and hiring and retaining talent. We go deep on events and event planning, from getting guests to turn up and to getting those first few sponsors to your events. Agency owners and personal branding, Adam's take, and quite a few stories from the front line in this one, and so much more. Now do me one favor, hit the subscribe or follow button wherever you're listening to this podcast so you're always the first to know when a new episode is released. Now, let's head over to this fantastic episode. Welcome to Agency Intensive.
Thank you very much for having me. Cheers.
I appreciate you coming over. I know it's a little bit of a run.
Well, no, it's good. It's a bit of free time just to get my head straight in the car before, start the day.
Well, I'm looking forward to jumping in, but I think before we get into the nitty-gritty of the ins and outs of running an agency, how did it all begin? Step us through the sort of the start of the agency journey.
Yeah, so I had no intention or understanding of e-commerce when I graduated from uni. I did a degree in economics and thought I was going to be this high-flying manager consultant. Went to work for Accenture and realised that I had to just learn SQL. I'm not technically minded. So that didn't work out too well. So I did it for about 3 years. Decided I was going to save the world and become a teacher. There's a cycle here. There's a 3-year thing. Did it for 3 years. Actually had a mental breakdown after 3 years, which wasn't the best, but made me kind of reevaluate what I wanted to do in my life. And then I went to actually work for an educational app company. So it was kind of half and half. There was the kind of corporate business side, and then there was the education side. And then at that time, when I again was about 3 or 4 years in, my brother-in-law was a quantity surveyor, and he got completely fed up with it and said, "I want to go and be a coder." And I went, "Okay, mate, yeah, good luck." And at the time, there was this Shopify thing coming about, and he met this guy called Jonathan Kennedy, and he was like, "Look, if you want to get involved with it, start learning it." And that's how he kind of started out. And he came to me and said, "Look, mate, I know you can do the marketing piece. Do you want to come into business with me?" And I kind of went, "Well, it's a bit risky. I've got a nice salary. Everything's hunky-dory." And we went for it. And he actually employed me for 3 months. It worked. We kept getting loads and loads and loads of work, and then Blend was then formed. So I had and it's one of the reasons I love e-commerce, because I think a lot of people that, I now work with my peers did sort of fall into it. And I think that's what's nice with e-commerce is that there isn't that kind of old boys club, particularly I think in the Shopify space, because we are realistically probably 10, 15 years old as an industry.
Yeah. Wow. So you basically pretty much burnt the bridges, or burnt the boats, I think they say, don't they? Burnt the boats and thought, let's give this a go. Yeah,
absolutely.
And so that was as an employed with this chap to start with.
Yeah, so Peter is actually my brother-in-law, who's also my business partner. So, that was a rough and the smooth over the years.
But isn't he the other side of the world now? So
he is, yeah. So I don't have to see him or smell him, which is, a benefit, really.
Yeah, that's a bonus. I have met him, to be fair. So
yeah, he's a good lad.
We'll make sure he sees this bit.
Yeah, exactly. Hi, Peter.
So obviously, you started, but obviously that usually that first year or so can be a little bit tricky, to say the least. How did you navigate that first year or two? Obviously, you're used to a certain salary. I'm sure Peter was, or was, obviously maybe a slightly different scenario, but ultimately you've got bills to pay, you've got a mortgage to pay, you've got maybe some other team to pay. That first week, that first year or two, how do you navigate some of the challenging times?
See, I would say in a way, we were very lucky and had it probably easier at the start, because at that time, we're talking sort of 8-9 years ago, Shopify was very much in infancy. And particularly in the UK. Now, with the US market, there were a lot of kind of, mom and pop shops who were started, and they needed someone to help them. So we used to get probably, I would say, between 20 and 30 leads a day from Shopify themselves. Oh, wow. Because it was such a new piece of tech. There wasn't anyone to do it. So we, at the start, we were doing lots of kind of very small jobs, kind of £200 here, £500 there. And then we sort of just eked it out. I think the problem that we did have in the first year, though, is that because they were such small businesses, they wanted one agency to do everything. So yes, we will do your PPC. we will do your site development. We will help you SEO. And of course, we did the usual dumb thing that a lot of agency founders do and think you can do it all. And actually you realize you can't. There's certain things you're good at, there's certain things you're all right at, and there's certain things you just need to bat off to someone else. So I think we learnt that the hard way probably in the second year, where we got to a point with certain clients. And for example, like Facebook ads, it just wasn't working. Because, we weren't invested enough in doing that to actually get returns. And that's when we had to kind of take a step back and say, look, what is the core thing we're good at doing? And then try and be a bit more specific about what we're going out to the market and what we could offer. So I think it was kind of the point of sort of narrowing it down and not trying to pretend that you're this kind of, e-commerce wizard, because we weren't.
That is so common though, isn't it? You see it, that's usually the number one sort of topic that we is threaded through a lot of the episodes. Ultimately, to run an agency and scale, you're plugging so many holes if you're trying to do everything. In reality, within most agencies, there's one or two, or hopefully one core strand that's maybe got a few offshoots, or you're known as that one thing. Put your hand up and you get known. Adam's the guy for.
Hopefully now it's CRO. I mean, that's been our kind of stick for at least the past kind of 2.5 years.
Did you see quite a shift when you sort of decided, right, you know what, we're not going to be, we do this, and sort of went, right, let's take a risk. We're gonna dump all this shit off the website. We're gonna maybe have to make a few people or retrain or whatever we have to do. We're gonna go all in. Well, what was that, navigating that sort of transition from a bit of maybe everything or half a dozen things to going, right, let's go?
Well, in all honesty, I think, what we did is we kind of reacted to what the market was telling us in a sense, because when we decided, look, originally we were very much come in, we do a website, design, build, you move on. And I think the problem with that for us is that from a pipeline and cash flow perspective, you do a project, they've spent the money as a brand, and then they want to move on and don't want to talk to you. So we were finding the stuff we were doing was a lot about customer experience. And I think from that, we then said, look, we're going to be a customer experience agency. And we, in all honesty, we watered it down too much. Oh, we still do a bit of development and we still do redesigns, but mainly we do CX. And I think the problem with that is people were still coming to us looking for a full redesign. We didn't want to do that work. And they said, well, what actually do? Oh, we do CX. Well, that's not really what we're looking for. And as then time went on through that, we said, well, look, it's not actually CX doing. It's actually improving the metrics of a store that is functioning well already but needs to be better. So we kind of said, actually, what we're really doing is CRO. And then, sort of making that decision, it's hard because I think, as an agency owner, you want to say, look, you want to give yourselves as many opportunities to sell as possible. And, for example, if SEO isn't doing so well, then you can sell PPC or you can sell redesigns. But actually, if you narrow it down more, what we found is, because your messaging is so much more CRO, you naturally get rid of the chaff that you don't want, and then you get a smaller group of people, but they're the people who actually want to buy from
conversations.
You. Exactly. And I think, it was a hard thing to do because we knew that we were going to narrow down the people that we could approach. But at the same time, it's made our staff happier, it's made us happier, it's made selling easier, because when people come in and say, oh, actually, we want an agency for everything, we can't do that, guys, but we can do the CRO piece, and then we've got 3 or 4 partner agencies we can then refer you to. For some people that works, for some it doesn't. But if it doesn't work for them, we don't want to bring them on because we know down the line they'll be unhappy and they'll walk away.
It's a beautiful thing, I think, when you get a lead that comes in and then they've seen that you are the CRO firm. They come and they inquire, you've maybe been recommended, even better, and they want to have a CRO conversation, and you think, oh,
it's the dream.
Oh, this is great. The chance of conversion, obviously, is sky high in comparison to, we're doing a bit of this and that, and we maybe haven't got much experience there, but we'll have a go at it, sort of thing. Yeah, difference must be night and day. Yeah,
it is. And I think, it's also, I think, with those conversations, I think, CRO, I always say is quite a lot, CRO, there's this kind of broken telephone issue with it, in that, when CRO started, it was very much kind of a data-driven, looking at analytics, making hypotheses based off the data, and then doing implementation on site. I think the problem is that has become diluted now. And a lot of the time, you have a conversation about CRO and it's like, right, can you just have a look at the site and do some stuff for us? Well, we can, And there's an element to what we do on that front, but if you want it to really work for the longevity, it needs to be a bit deeper.
Yeah.
So you come across those kind of issues sometimes. And I think the other issue you get across is when you talk about CRO, I think some people get a little bit confused about the acronym and not actually what it's about. So for me, what CRO is about is your lifetime value of a customer is X and you need to get it to Y.
Yeah.
What are the things that you can do on site and off site to get that number up?
Yeah.
And I generally have that conversation at the start to make sure we're on the same page, because sometimes that isn't
just
what
an understanding is needed. Yeah.
You know, and it's like our conversion rate is 2.1% at the moment. We need to be 3.1%. Okay, but what about the other metrics? What does that mean bottom line?
Yeah.
You know, it's
so I'm going to go back a step. So obviously we talked about doing a bit of everything, and it's quite a lot of project work potentially at the front end when you're building websites. Whereas now, obviously with CRO, I'm intrigued to know how your billings may be split. In terms of like projects, retainer. Obviously, I'm assuming CRO. Is a few options on the menu for potential customers, but ultimately it's an ongoing process, isn't it?
Yeah.
So then it's a retainer based process, but
Absolutely.
then you've got projects as well. How do you sort of...
Yeah, so we generally are at the moment about 90% retainer based.
Yeah.
The other 10% of our revenue is for either kind of short-term development projects, but the reason we do those is because we often see those as a chance to prove ourselves.
To lead into...
So, it might be a brand that's not quite ready for CRO, but we do that in the hope then that we can get them to that point, and then we can then work on it. And with the CRO retainers that we do, we are generally trying to work with brands that are doing between £2 and £10 million or $2 and $10 million a year.
Yep.
Because the issue we find is that smaller than that, there isn't enough traffic on a site to make CRO worthwhile.
Yeah.
And secondly, in terms of organisation bigger than 10 million, we find that very hard to work with. We can't service a team where there are 8 or 9 people making decisions about CRO. It's got to be quick, it's got to be rapid. We've just actually lost a client recently who was way above that figure. And the main issue is that we were making suggestions to them, but each of those suggestions was going through 3 or 4 levels of approval.
Taking weeks to be...
Yeah. And it's not right for them and it's not right for us.
Yeah.
And ultimately then, because you can't implement, you then can't get the results. And
that is a great point for people listening, because I think quite a lot of projects, just thinking about the SEO side of our agency, we're sort of selling the recommendations, but ultimately there's only so many we can make, and therefore you're getting delayed, and then you might have some difficult conversations. So it's trying to have, working with people where, as you say, that you're able to implement. There's probably a nimble process at the back end, or the people that you're dealing with are the people that can make the decisions. Yeah. As things get stretched out, and then somebody's saying, well, what's that agency doing? We think, well, we're trying to do the thing, but we're not getting any output from you guys. We need a little 10% effort from you guys, or whatever it may be. It can be a little bit challenging, can't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, it's one of the things that we always ask when we talk to people on the phone is, who's in your team?
Yeah.
Because we, when we hear that, there is, 5 or 6 people within that group making decision, that then has an impact on our appetite for it. If we know that we're doing with 1 or 2 people with a very specific remit, that's a lot more attractive to us. Yeah. More so than that being a big company that's got a bigger budget. Yeah. We'd rather have a smaller budget, but know that we can make the impact then, and then retain them. Have them as a great case study to then bring other brands on.
I think the projects thing is interesting, because a lot of people would just do retainer, or they try to just do retainer, but obviously potentially 1, 2 out of 3 projects, you're getting a chance to obviously meet, greet, test, give an example of work. They get to know your team. Then the problem is a lot of teams in merchants have maybe been burnt before, have heard everything a million times over, a little bit tainted. Whereas projects, it's almost like a taster of your agency, or the agency's listening. So, I'm a massive believer in doing project work. It's quite ring fenced. The scope is very clear, which you've got to be careful of, as next thing you know. But you don't mind a little bit of helping out here and there. But you do a project, obviously it's a chance to showcase what you can do. They get to meet 3 or 4 of your team. They've not just had the experience with the sales guy, maybe that sold the project. So obviously we've gone on that journey. We've started the agency with your brother-in-law, very, very unique proposition that, and then obviously really solidified the messaging in the market of CRO agency. but then ultimately winning new business. I know you do some amazing things with events. Step me through how, what you're doing, but how did that start? I mean, I know you've got an amazing, events company. I know it's a lot more than that, but how did it start? And step us through some of the maybe behind the scenes things that help you win new business.
Yeah, I mean, we first started using events predominantly for Blend when we started as a way to try to bring new business in. And what we used to do is do this thing called Shopify meetups. And what Shopify would do is they give you, a chunk of cash and say, right, go and run an event in the city near you, bring merchants in, bring tech partners, bring agencies. And obviously, that worked really well. We did that. I think we probably did 5 or 6 of those over the course of maybe 2 or 3
like 10, 20 people or bigger?
Yeah, I mean, the first couple, I think we were about 20 people. And then we did one at Harvey Nichols in Birmingham. We had 60 people for, and that was great. Great content off the back of it. And I think, what I liked about events and what I still like about events is it gives a perception that you are bigger, older than you are as an agency. And I think, it helped us win some business early days because people thought, because, our faces were everywhere on LinkedIn, that we were a bigger team and had been more experienced, which was great, for us. COVID kind of happened and obviously everything went to SHIT. And then afterwards, we all did it. We tried to get involved in webinars. We, tried to, get people involved that way. And there was a lot out there that was going on. And we said, look, what we will need to do is do something where it's a networking event that we would go to, because believe it or not, I bloody hate networking events because I'm crap at it.
Same.
Peter's even worse. So we said, look, if we do something whereby it's very tongue-in-cheek, it's very relaxed, but there's lots of value in it, that's kind of the way to go. And that's how eCom Collab Club was born. So we started off, we hired a cinema out in Leicester Square in London. We had about 30 people show up.
Whose idea was the cinema then?
So I nicked that completely.
Was it from us or?
No. It was...
I'm going to check your timeline.
No. It was actually, I think it was a networking event. It was like a general business networking event in Birmingham. And the life of me, the name of that has gone out of my head. But we went to it like, this is a great...
Cool spot.
Yeah, great idea because, you've got a big area.
Venue makes a difference, doesn't it?
Yeah.
When you think networking, you think 6:30 in the morning maybe with a cold cup of tea and a bacon sandwich in the back house of some, excuse me.
Yeah, exactly. But, I'm sure, and I'm not calling out BNI specifically, but I think, those kind of type meetings where, it is very much, you turn up in a suit, everyone does their pitch. It's very, very structured and formal. There's that sort of, you go with a bit like, I've got to go and win business today. Yeah. And we just want it to be the opposite of that.
Very relaxed.
So, that's what we did. We had Mark Cooper, who's now at Dot Digital, but now at that time was with ShipStation, I think it was, or one of the shipping brands, and Starship it rather. And we said, look, if you sponsor it, it's the first one, see how we get on. 30 people showed up, and then we just started building month on month. So we get about 110, 120 people a month.
And how long ago was that when that first event?
2 years ago.
So it was only 2.
Yeah,
wow,
yeah. So it's gone quickly, but I think it's, yes, there's been a lot of work our side, but I think also what I love now is with the events that we do, we get a lot of people who have then gone and done like derivative events off the back of it. So we have a group who have the tech founders lunch. We have the women in e-commerce lunch that follows
sort
it.
of met at the event and said, we could do an offshoot, do our own thing, do a separate event, very specialist. Yeah.
So it gives that opportunity. For me, I love that feeling, the fact that people have then got together off the back of what we're doing. Yeah. It's a really nice feeling to kind of have that you built something that people will go to, but then do other things off the back of it.
Yeah.
And I think from an agency point of view, I'm very careful because the two businesses are separate. And what I don't want people to think is, look, I'm using this as kind of, a sales funnel, because in the time that we've done this, we've never used it as you came to eCom Collab Club, come and buy stuff at Blend. We've never done that. Yeah. But, serendipitously, it sort of just happens anyway, because they see, people see you doing this thing. We get big splashes. Yeah. It follows on that way, really.
So I think, we talk about events a lot. I think the space, in e-com space, particularly, obviously we've got a lot of founders that we're listening that aren't in the e-com space, but e-com, there's a nice array of events out there. But maybe the guys that are listening are thinking, do you know what, let's maybe start and do an event and get going. Obviously, in those early days, you committed to some space, and you got sort of 30 odd. But now, obviously, there's a bit more going on, a few more people doing things. I'm really intrigued from a personal point of view as well. Sort of getting 110 people there. And obviously trying to get a mix of people. So there's a commercial side to it as well. So you've got getting people in the room, which I think is the hardest part of any event. To promote an event and to deliver the value of the event, I think it's the easier part. Obviously, you've got to get the right speakers and just have a little word with them a bit. Say, hang on a minute, you're not putting them slides in. It's about the value. Yep. But ultimately, getting people to sign up and obviously getting people to turn up. We'll cover that first. What's some of the things that maybe you do? I mean, I know you're fantastic on the sort of personal branding on LinkedIn, and we'll come to that. But, I guess could touch on LinkedIn, but what sort of things are you doing to really drive people to the venue and get them to turn in?
The main thing that we did in the early days is that we used our network of partners from the agency side. And, the whole thing was then is, look, we're creating this event for the community, so we want you to be there who is already part of it. Yeah. And that worked really well because obviously, look, the partners that we work with, they wanted to be part of it because they wanted that partnership with us ultimately to be fruitful. So that was kind of the first rung of it. Yeah. The other side of it then is that we then did a lot of work, particularly with LinkedIn.
So are those partners potentially speaking then to start with, and so we'll do it together, 2 or 3 people coming along. They're not necessarily paying at that stage.
No, so
to sponsor.
Exactly. And it was more at that stage, like, get them involved with it at this early stage. Yeah. And, we've still got people now who have pretty much been to every single one because, they feel like they're part of that community now and it's kind of owned itself. Yeah. I think, getting brands to go to events has always been, tricky, I think, regardless of whatever industry you're in. Yeah. And in fact, the first, I think, year, we didn't actually invite brands. It was just about partnerships with agencies and tech providers. Yeah. So to get the brands involved, what we then did is brought brands in to be speakers. So I think, that's my biggest thing is that we would kind of, in all intents and purposes, we're using the brands as bait for the other brands. Yeah. Because, as much as you and I don't like to admit this, Rich, people don't really give a shit about what we've got to say. Yeah. If you're a brand, they want to hear from the coalface what is happening in that business.
Somebody that's already doing the 3 times what you're doing.
Exactly. Yeah. So, we did a lot then of saying, well, look, actually going out on LinkedIn, people saying, look, we're running this event. It's a great community event for eCom professionals. And by the way, we've got XYZ person speaking on it. Would you like to come along completely free of charge? So we're at a stage now where about 25% of our attendees are brands. Yeah. And then we think that will probably grow into 2025 as we keep pushing that out really. Yeah, yeah. But I think the other thing as well is that interplay with the agency is I also use eCom Collab Club as a way of keeping in touch with our potential leads. So, we've got leads that we've pitched for but not won, but I will then invite them to eCom Collab Club and invite them to the D2C dining club dinners that we do. Yeah. So, you can kind of cross-pollinate it in that respect without it kind of being too forceful. Yeah, yeah. And that's another tool that I've got in my kit to then keep, in touch and going out with something meaningful. Yeah. Because I find that, from an agency perspective, there's only so much content or update you can go out with. Yeah. But if it's like, look, I want to give this thing for free and I want you to come along to this thing.
Speak to this guy, this person, this tech company, who else can I introduce you to with, help with? It's maybe not something we do, but, obviously you've got a whole Rolodex of tech partners, providers, agencies. So sponsorship, I think that's quite a big one for events. Obviously, putting on an event in Leicester Square, it's obviously there's a cost to that, cost to you guys as a company. What sort of things you've been doing to get sponsors on board?
Yeah, I mean the sponsorship side. When we started, there wasn't really a great deal out there, and I know it's only 2 years ago, but in terms of this kind of format, it was fairly kind of fresh. So what we used to do is we used to offer a sponsorship to a tech provider for one event. And that worked pretty well because there was a lot of hype about it. People wanted to sponsor. But then obviously as time's gone on, there are lots of different events going on. Yeah. So what we said is actually we will change the sponsorship slightly so that we can charge a fee for the year and then you get exposure at different events through the year. Yeah. Plus being on our mailing list, plus the social posts that we do, plus the other offshoot.
Plus you probably speak at one or two.
Exactly.
But you get exposure maybe a lot more than just the one you're at.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think, the thing with that then is that there's not so much pressure for them to get that ROI from that one singular event. And secondly, because they're then involved throughout the year, they're also getting more touch points with different people, which I think, probably wasn't happening before.
Yeah, that makes sense actually as a sponsor as well, because obviously you go into an event, let's say there's 25 merchants, they're not necessarily ready to do anything right now, but in 3-4 months they might be, but they might have forgotten about that sponsor back then, but if that sponsor's still front and centre. Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, what I would say, and it's a bit of a gripe of mine, we've got some great sponsors, a sponsor over the years, but I do feel that tech providers don't use them enough. And what I mean by that is, look, every panel, every event that we do, we record professionally. We give that recording to them. I've never really seen any of them chop it up and use it as marketing.
They've got some crazy content there that they could...
Exactly. You could get the transcript, turn it into a blog. Great. Do the follow-up.
It's so true. I was speaking to a tech partner yesterday, and the conversation got to their video and the fact that they just haven't got the capacity to create, but they're one of the biggest firms names that we could mention on this podcast. And it's like, it's crazy, guys. Why have you not got this capacity to be able to edit, create, publish? And they just didn't have it.
Exactly. And I think, we've tried quite hard the past 6 months to encourage more of that, because then they win. And secondly, from a salvage point of view, if they can prove ROI from it, then they're more likely to sponsor again.
Yeah.
So I think we're trying to sort of hold the hand a bit more on that front, rather than looking at, we're sponsoring an event, end of story. Yeah. No, that's the jump off point. Yeah. Then you're going to do all these offshoot pieces off the back of it. But, it's at the moment, it's hard to get people to think that way.
Yeah. So you've got 2 businesses now then, in effect, for the last couple of years, and obviously both growing. And, it's funny because I was maybe 3 years ago looking at a platform that we were going to look at making into a community, and I installed a bit of software called school.com, and I had a good play of it. I don't think anybody in my industry or our industry would have ever heard of it back then. And I'm in about 20 different communities now, and I paid my 97 quid a month to have my own and play and whatnot. And then all of a sudden, you guys popped up about maybe 8 months ago. I'm going to get my timeline right. And I was like, guys are on it.
It's...
So obviously, I think it'd be good to just talk about that for the guys that are listening. I think to get a good feel about, building community around the agency. I know it's like agencies here and the events company, if we're calling it that, is here. But obviously, it's all connected. It's all sort of washes through each other. What you've done there with the community.
Yeah, I mean, it's the school thing really started because we used to have a Slack channel, and if anyone's part of these big Slack channels, I don't know about you, but I find them absolutely mind-blowing in the sense that there is so much going on all day. It's a continuous stream. You tend to miss things a lot, and it gets to the point where you end up muting them. And it's the same, like, I'm part of kind of these WhatsApp groups as well, and they can be useful, but again, it's this constant stream. So what we said with school is when we came across it is, number one, we can still have that kind of back and forth, but it's more kind of LinkedIn format. But secondly, we can make it bigger and make it more of a hub. So for example, we've got a section there for courses. We've got about 6 or 7 courses in there. Yeah. We do masterclasses, which are kind of, live events where you can get involved.
So that's something in the calendar every other Thursday, whatever it is, you go, log in.
And you can go and find it and be part of that. So you've got another dimension. And then obviously you've got another aspect of it where you can then gamify it, whereby if people are putting in content and it's getting good responses, you can then do sort of a gamification of the people that were in there. Yeah. So it just...
I really like that feature. So obviously you start off on like level 1 or level 0, don't you? And then the more interaction you give or give, I guess, you build points, don't you? And then you could say, right, well, when you hit level 5, it unlocks, a 2-hour interview with you in the Shopify something or whatever.
No, definitely. Yeah. I mean, I would say word of warning though, the problem that we had with it though is we did run a competition using that. And what the competition was is that basically if you were top of the leaderboard, you would then have a space at an expo that we were running at. Oh. Yeah. And unfortunately, what happened is that one of our members decided that they were going to kind of create a little bit of a pod and get people to comment on one another so that they then would win. We got told about it, found out about it, and that person was then removed from it.
Yep.
So I would say, look,
don't
I
mess
think,
with Adam.
it's you know, it's one of those things. Like, I think it is a good feature, but I think you just got to be mindful that people will try and gamify it in that situation. But for me, you know, school for us, I don't think we're there yet. I think we will get to it in another 12 months of getting it really functional. We want to, but kind of creating a hub where people will go to that is more, you know, for me, it feels like a very niche version of LinkedIn. Yeah. Plus the fact that you've then got these extra resources that you can access. So kind of becoming a resource hub rather than just, you know, this stream of like, message,
one way sort of thing. Yeah. No, I really like it. I really like the platform. I really like what you're doing with the platform. I'd recommend, obviously, anybody listening now to go and sign up. I don't know, is it free? I can't remember.
It's $8 a month.
$8 a month, yeah. So which is pretty basically free, isn't it?
Yep.
If you listen to this podcast and you haven't got $8 a month, then you need to have a little chat. But I mean, I absolutely would recommend. Obviously, there's a lot of people in there, especially for in e-commerce specifically.
Sure, yeah.
So we've covered a fair bit of ground. It all sounds pretty rosy out there, doesn't it? You know, as a growing agency, an events company that's booming, lots of events, and I think we could talk a lot more about events. But the reality of running an agency, some days can be maybe not quite as rosy. What would you say? When sometimes things are a bit tough. Yep. Maybe we're sat here just outside of a month or so. The sort of summer ended. Summer last 3 or 4 months in the space. Have you found the last sort of 6 months or so? What are some of the things you maybe do, on a personal level to get you through when times are a little bit tricky?
Yeah, I mean, look, we were talking before we recorded, weren't we, Rich? And I was saying, look, this year for us has probably been one of the toughest years we've ever had. And I'll go into some detail on that. I think, look, firstly, this year we have definitely found that we are now competing in pitches between 6 and 10 agencies for a pitch. Previous years, it's been between 3 to 4. So that adds, first of all, there is a lot more competition there. And secondly, on top of that, brands that we talk to are very price sensitive. I think what happened over the COVID period is that, e-commerce boomed. There were a lot of people who saw that was happening, and a lot of these kind of smaller agencies have come in and started offering agency services. I think, on top of that then, with the way the economy has been, there's a bit of a factor in that. But, ultimately there is always going to be business out there making money. So I would say that's less of a factor. So for me this year, it's been about saying, look, as an agency, can we bring out a cheaper service offering to what we're doing, but maintaining the quality? And can we then still go that extra mile that we have been doing previously? So the balance of doing that has been really, really tricky. And I think, we've definitely had to, look at cutting costs this year. We have also had to make sure that, when we are, spending in terms of things like marketing, always spending the right things. Yeah. Previous years it was like, okay, we'll do this event.
Try something.
Yeah, try it.
A bit more brutal with decisions.
Exactly. And I think, we've just had to just really tighten our belts a bit. I think, the other thing for me that is always tricky and has always been tricky, I think will continue to be, is recruitment and staff. We've had points where there's been bubbles in terms of, the salaries for developers. I think a few years ago, there were a lot of big e-commerce brands out there who are VC backed coming in, sometimes offering double, triple what we could offer. And we can't.
Fully remote.
Yeah, exactly. So, that was tricky. And I think at the same time, because there is more demand from clients now, what you then have to expect from your team is bigger. And obviously, we're in a time when you can't afford to pay them more. You have to try and look after them in the best way that you can. So it, for me, I think this year, keeping staff happy and offering clients something that is giving them value and not making their heads turn. Yeah. Those are the two biggest things that have definitely kept me up at night.
So it's been pretty nimble then. Sort of think, well, actually, we've maybe pitched a few things and we've not got them. Why have we not got them? They mentioned price, but is it really price? Maybe it is, maybe it isn't, but maybe we need to have a look at adjusting that offer, which I think can be quite tricky, a tricky decision as a founder, I think. I find that difficult. No, it's not, we're not. It's not us, it's them, but reality is things have it's a little bit tricky out there, or you could say very tricky. It has been, depending on what you're doing. But looking at the offer, maybe making a few ad hoc decisions on a few potential partnerships, stroke new bits of business, which I think you've got to do in this climate. I agree. So with the team, then, what are some of the things you sort of do in terms of recruiting, specifics around recruiting the right people in the first place?
Yeah.
Obviously, I guess you've got this big network. When you've got your event sort of net out there, you're always having a little, she's quite nice. She's quite good at the thing. Yeah, he's yeah. But then also retaining these guys. Obviously, there's a salary issue, if you like, or not issue, but there's a salary challenge. If we part the salary challenge for a minute, because that's a bit of a challenge, full stop, isn't it? It can be. But obviously, finding new talent and retaining them, what are some sort of actuals that you do?
I mean, the main thing with recruitment for us is when we do put an ad out there, and we generally would start with a LinkedIn ad, we get a lot of applications from people who have been generally involved in e-commerce. We get some people that have been specifically involved within Shopify. And then we get a lot of people who have not ever even touched a computer. So there's 3 pots to draw from. From our point of view, what we found is, as a small size company, there's 15 of us. We don't have the capacity as a business to really come in and, spend a lot of time in upskilling people. So we have to be very specific with the people we hire of saying, well, look, when they come in, they need to have had a very specific experience within Shopify, work with specific types of companies, and have done very specific things. So we've just tried to make sure that when we do recruit, we then bring in people that can hit the ground running. Now, it's not to say, that we don't, want to sort of retain and train people, because we do. We pay for all of our team to use CXL. Yeah. So all of them have an opportunity then to kind of continue their learning. And then I think, on top of that as well, we also then have quite a few of kind of, team training days where you've got people then looking at a particular aspect or a particular skill to try and sort of develop that way.
So is that something like every quarter you have an external person come in and then the majority of the team and they're learning something or training on something? Yeah.
And we worked a lot with a consultant who helped us with, there's this thing called insights profiles. And I've talked about it a lot in the past, but they have been fantastic, because what you then do is you give your team a manual for each other about how that person operates best, and also how you as a person operate best. And I think that's something, again, that's helped us a lot with kind of getting that cohesion in the team.
Understanding each other.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And, I always tell a story about me and Peter. We once fell out very famously with an F word being exchanged to one another. And after that, we actually happened to meet Sarah, who was our consultant, and she told me about insights profiles, and we did it. And what we realized is that actually we were very similar in some respects, but massively different in the other. And it made us realize that both of us will get to that end point, but the way that he does it is very different to me. And it was that acceptance.
Now you understand that. It's like, okay, I realise why he's like that. He's
exactly.
Like that. Yeah.
And we're both as pig-headed as each other, and we both thought that we were right. And
it's a great exercise to do, isn't it?
It is, and in all honesty, I think, it probably saved us from having, of going, look, actually, you don't want to do this anymore.
Yeah, yeah.
It was a big, big moment for us.
Something we pinched from another agency, thank you, was similar to what you said, so when somebody starts here, they fill out what we refer to as my manual.
Yes.
And it's 10 questions, what do you like to be called? What's your favourite such and such? How do you like to be given feedback? How do you like to learn?
Perfect.
And so on and so on and so on. So when somebody starts, they can get a feel for the other people in the teams, and everyone can. It's quite a recent thing, so it's like only probably 2 months ago. And it's just like some very, I'm looking at, I didn't know that. I didn't know that such and such is, it's just really quite insightful. And then obviously when you're chatting to them, you can have different conversations as well about the things they're interested in that you might not know. And, you might find that, actually, I'm into that as well. And
exactly. And I think, it's important, isn't it? Because we're trying to, I think with an agency, you need to present at that as a united front. And secondly, you absolutely need to work as a united front. So the more that you can get people understanding each other about what makes them tick, the better it's going to be. And I think, this is sometimes the issue, with agencies when they get to 60, 70, 100 people, because you don't have that sort of personal touch and that personal understanding, that sometimes can fall away. And I think, you definitely see with, these kind of like monstrous agencies, particularly in the US, their rate of retention is very poor because I don't think, you have that ability at that size unless you work really damn hard at it to make sure that people are, constantly bonding together.
Yeah. You mentioned the US a couple of times. Are you sort of got sort of a bit of a focus on sort of US and growing in the US more?
Yeah, I mean, we, as a business, we are probably about 80% US in terms of our revenue. And it all stems back to what I was saying at the start about when we started.
Yeah.
Because the US market was, sort of really open, we naturally just stayed there.
Yeah.
So most of the clients that we work with in the US are East Coast. So time zone wise, it works pretty well.
Too bad,
I think the other thing as well, it's changed in the UK, but I think there still very much is this transactional idea of relationship with an agency in that you come in, you get paid your money, you do your thing. Whereas I think, with American brands, because the market's more mature, I will have brands come to saying, look, Adam, we're absolutely screwed in this respect. We've tried this thing, it didn't work. Can you help us? Whereas the general conversation, I think in the UK tends to be, how much is it going to be? Well, what do you want? Well, tell us what you do. Yeah. And it's like, it's still that, like, you still feel I feel sometimes that we're seen as like the IT department. And it's that kind of relationship that for some is changing, but for a lot still, it is very much that's the first question. Whereas, I want it to be, look, this thing is not working for us. Our conversion rate's terrible. We haven't got customers coming back. We tried this thing. What do you suggest? Because we're more, we want to give people, a bit of, okay, look, bit of hope. Okay, there is something they can do. And then we can get into conversation of this is how we're doing this, how much it's going to cost. But no, that would be my advice really to, I think, to brands, go in with, for an open mind, open heart. And secondly, I think, from an agency point of view, give people the ability to give that information and get a number from them. What is the number you need to get to? Is it 3 million quid by the end of the year?
Yeah.
Is it that you've been told your conversion rate needs to be 3%?
Yeah.
Whatever it is, put that down. You as the brand and you as the agency have got that as a single focus.
Yeah.
Rather than kind of being, wow, we're improving this, improving that. Well,
it does my head in. Like, I went to a conference yesterday. It was a great conference, but I just fear there's so much noise everywhere.
Yeah.
And the reality is you sit down with a founder or a senior person that's responsible. At the end of the day, should be somewhere where we're trying to get. And usually they should have a pound sign in front of it. Not, I just need to page one for this, or we just need to sell a bit more. Or it's like, guys, come on, we're going to bumble along, or we're going to have like a and actually have an actual hard sort of target KPI that's, okay, it might be a stretch, but let's all get on the same page rather than a lot of noise, I find.
I agree. I think, the problem is, Rich, is that, in the industry that we're in, there are so many different factors, uncontrollable variables that can happen that impact on the sales of an e-commerce brand. But by not having a single number to get to, you end up in this very wishy-washy relationship where you're putting all these metrics out week to week, month to month. This thing's better, this thing's better, this thing's better. But ultimately, it's that nagging question, the pounds or dollars in our bank account are not going up at the rate we need to be. And, unless you get to that and say, look, we've tried these things, this worked, that didn't work, we're progressing towards it in this way. Yeah. You're always going to have a tension between agency and a brand.
How about having a conversation with your team that's like, if they're like, if even your own team, but the client's team, and they're wishy-washy, this, that, and the other, and at the end of the month, everyone gets paid, don't they? Or they should get paid.
Yep.
But if you paid them in ROAS, or you paid them in a 2% lift in this, or a 5% on this, they'd be like, what the frick are you on about? So we go, right, here's your $4,000. Oh, great. Bit of a change of the language. I think there was a couple of presentations yesterday that were great because they were very much, at the end of the day, there's a lot of big brands that are struggling out there. And I think it's usually, there's obviously all sorts of reasons, but quite often, they're making their money is the reality. But so we've covered a lot of ground, Adam, a lot of ground. I feel we could go on, but obviously I sense that, you've definitely seen a lot, heard a lot, been in front of a lot of different brands and clients and partners. What's probably one of the funniest things you've seen, or unexpected things you've seen in a pitch?
Oh my God. I mean, So yeah, we got introduced to this very big brand in the States, and we got very excited about the pitch. And we were scheduled to have this call, which we believe was just going to be the CEO. So me and Peter get onto the call, excitedly waiting, and we go in and we see that there are 6 people waiting in the meeting. So that's strange. Anyway, we then get on. Not only are the 6 people waiting, there is then a very beautiful oak boardroom table with the CEO sat right at the end, and then lined with 10 other people. So, you know me, Rich, I'm fairly casual the way that I dress. I think I had a T-shirt on with maybe some yogurt down it, and Peter probably hadn't shaved for a few weeks. And we kind of sat there and went, oh, hi guys, lovely to meet you. The call was 30 minutes. We finished introductions at minute 13. So that was an interesting one. And then try and cram in 17 minutes what we got to cover was pretty damn hard. So
did you win it?
We did, but I think this
the yogurt that did it.
Yeah, it was yogurt on the top. But I think this was kind of one of the lessons we learned about working with big companies, and that in that situation, we weren't the right agency for them. We knew it really from day one, and I think ultimately they did, because they had such a large team and so many different things happening for them, not just the D2C front, but marketplaces, retail.
Yeah,
that isn't our forte. We are pure play. D2C, Shopify Plus, and we should have really known from that point. But yeah, that was just unbelievable. And there's been some other disasters as well, but yeah, I'll talk about those another time.
Well, thanks for sharing that. I think last question from me. I think sort of like personal branding around agency founders. I think it's something you do fantastically. I think you bring your personality to it. But I think there'll be a lot of people listening, a lot of agency founders that are maybe a little bit anxious about what to share and how to go about it. What would your advice be on that?
I think for me, your give a shit levels need to be on the floor. And it's the best advice that Peter's given me, because I graduated, I went in a very corporate environment. I used to put an accent on because I didn't want people to know that I was a Brummie. Yeah, believe it or not, I actually did. It was pathetic. And when I started working with Peter...
I want to hear the accent in a minute. No.
That's another time. A few beers maybe first. But I think, I really Peter said to me, he's like, look, ultimately, we do what we do. We are who we are. Yeah. And we just need to tell people how it is.
Yeah.
So I think when it comes to me and the stuff that I put out there, I try and boil it down to be simpler and not talking acronyms, which I think a lot of people get into that kind of habit of doing.
Yeah.
And secondly, also not trying to make out that everything's rosy all the time, because the reality is it's not.
Yeah.
I know countless people on LinkedIn who will put things on, and I know that they're struggling with either personal things, with business things, or it might be. So I think as long as you're putting, for me, from the personal branding side, putting stuff out there is actually useful and helpful.
Yeah.
The sales bit will come afterwards, because people will then resonate with you. And also be prepared that some people are going to like you. Some people can't bloody stand me, and that's fine. I've got no issues with that. But the people that I want to like me and I want to get value from me generally do.
Yeah.
But it's just, I think, with particularly on personal branding, when it comes to LinkedIn, being somewhere in the middle where you just kind of like another post that's coming out, I'm delighted to announce that come on. No one gives a shit about that. Tell me a reason why that thing is useful. Yeah. If you've got a new role, tell us about some of the exciting things you're going to do. Yeah. Tell us about some of the things that you're going to now be able to do or provide to people.
Yeah.
So just make it a bit more inviting and exciting.
Do you find that comes quite naturally to you, though? Because obviously you write some quite lengthy posts sometimes. Yeah. It's just quite a natural flow for you.
For me,
you spend a lot of time spending hours a day. You just 20 minutes in the morning.
It's pretty quick for me. But, look, I'm someone, even through school, words, English, writing was always my forte.
Yeah.
The math side, technical side, not so much. So I think, for me, it's a bit more straightforward, but I would say have a look at what other people are doing within the industry and try and find someone that is closer to you in terms of how you think about life. Because if you can use that as inspiration, I think, that's a great. I mean, for me, there's a guy called James Tuckerman that I really like. He talks about himself as Mr. B2B. but everything that he puts out there is so straightforward to understand.
Yeah.
It's so simple in terms of application, but it's massively valuable. I'm nowhere near him in terms of what he does, but I look at him for inspiration and think, is this the kind of stuff that James Tuckerman would do?
Yeah.
Probably, yeah. Like, you got people like that, Alex Hamotzi, who I can't stand.
Yeah.
You know, I wouldn't ever do anything like his because he's too brash, he's too raw.
But you bought school.
Pardon? I did, unfortunately, yeah. So, yeah, he wins, sorry. But it's, you know, I think you just got to find someone, I think, for inspiration rather than, you know, everyone wants to be Gary V. You're not Gary V.
Yeah.
Most people aren't. So just, you know, find your own thing that you feel comfortable in. And then rather than sitting there for hours going, shit, what am I writing on LinkedIn? It just becomes more natural then.
Well, thanks, Adam. I think
Pleasure.
We covered a lot of ground. We covered a lot of different things. Now, I like to finish every episode with a book recommendation. Do you have a book you'd recommend to our listeners?
Big recommendation from me, anything by Mike Michalowicz, but I would recommend The Pumpkin Plan. Particularly if you're like me, where you maybe have different business interests in different areas. It's all about nurturing the things, the pumpkins that are going to grow well, and killing the things that don't.
Great. We'll link it up in the show notes. For those that want to find out more about yourself, more about Blend, more about eCom Collab, what's the best way to find all that?
So you can find me on LinkedIn, Adam Pearce. I am also quite active on LinkedIn, obviously, but then on top of that, blendcommerce.com. And if you'd like to find out more about eCom Collab Club, if you search for eCom Collab Club, we have our monthly event in London, and we also have events in Bristol, Dublin, Manchester, Toronto, and soon to be Lisbon and Barcelona as well.
Wow. Fantastic. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you, Rich. Appreciate it. Cheers.
If you enjoyed this episode, hit the subscribe or follow button wherever you are listening to this podcast. So you're always the first to know when a new episode is released. Have a fantastic day, and I'll see you on the next one.